1700s. But originally we had ships going back from Havana, Cuba, and they were collecting gold and silver from mines in both Mexico and Peru. These ships would then come from Havana, Cuba back to Spain, usually once a year because of all the pirates along the shore here. So they went in a convoy. There was a number of hurricanes I want to talk about, but I want to talk about the hurricane of 1715 first. And in that hurricane, 10 ships went down up between Fort Pierce and Sebastian, 30 miles north of Fort Pierce. And the reason the ships were so close to shore in the first place is because of the Gulf Stream. It goes off our shore out here. It's about 55 miles over to the Bahamas from here, but the Gulf Stream runs along at 4 to 5 knots, 4 to 5 miles an hour going north. So these old ships would only average 6 miles per hour in the entire trip back to Spain. So if they could catch that Gulf Stream along part of the trip here, that was like a super highway for them. So they're really flying out here. Unfortunately, they didn't know about hurricanes, and they often flew ashore. And I'll talk about the hurricane of 1715, which 10 ships sank in Fort Pierce and Sebastian. They immediately sent for help back to Cuba, as well as up to St. Augustine. They had 24-foot long boats with sails. And from Cuba, they sent back a rescue group along with divers. They were Native Americans. They actually dove on the wreck. They're only in about 20 feet of water. They recovered about half of the registered treasure of $14 million. The survivors, and about 1,000 people died in that shipwreck, then made it up to St. Augustine and so on back to Spain. In the 1960s, we had a man by the name of Kip Wagner, came down from Ohio, and he set up at Sebastian. He was a carpenter and used to walk the beaches on the weekends. Particularly after storms, he's finding silver coins, pieces of 8, that would actually wash up on the shore. So he formed a group of his neighbors out there. They started walking the shores and picking up all these coins and said, wouldn't it be interesting to know where those ships were that sank back in 1715? So they wrote to Seville, Spain, they wrote to St. Augustine and got information on the shipwrecks. They then began diving out on the shipwrecks, and they were finding so much gold and silver out there that they called it the Florida Gold Rush. A man by the name of Mel Fisher, a pretty famous treasure hunter, was over in California at the time. He heard about it, got in touch with Kip Wagner. Mel became so excited about what was going on over here, he sold out his operation in California, brought his divers over here to Florida, and began diving on the wrecks. Mel had a couple of things going for him that helped out. One was a big metal detector called a magnometer, which determined where steel and iron was on the ship's wreckage were on the ocean floor. There'd be your ship's anchors, cannons, cannonballs, and so on. That would be pretty close to where the treasure was going to be as well. He also had a blaster that he put over the back of his outboard motors. If the prop wash comes out of the outboard motor, he could redirect it down into the sand to dig out the sand whenever he determined there was metal on the ocean floor. You could dig a hole 5, 6 feet deep, 10, 12 feet long, and bring up gold very quickly that way. During World War II, the Navy at Fort Pierce had their training grounds for the UDT, which is now the Navy SEALs, and they developed scuba gear back then. Well, they were using that in the 1960s on these off the treasure boats. And one of the politicians up there in Fort Pierce began calling it the Treasure Coast to attract more tourists. That name, the Treasure Coast, is stuck to this day.
Instead of Mosquito Coast.
Right. Well, we have plenty of those too, and no sea.